very important is that whatever we do, we have to keep the development planning process central to our efforts to accelerate the SDGs. Because, as many of you would know, if you spend outside the development planning process, it is an offense punishable by law. And so we have to keep reminding ourselves that as much as we decide what interventions we need to undertake, they have to be built within the development plan, the sector plans, but also the plans of local authorities. So in my last point is a little bit of reflection on the actions we are taking, we are happening here in Uganda. And I will focus on three. Number one is the digitization. You'll be pleased to know that in the development plan, the current development plan now, 80% of government services will be offered online. And that will be in 2025, just 3 years to go, which is good, which will revolutionize the way we do business. And it is important that as we do this, we also think about how we can leverage it, but also how we can be accountable, in the sense that if we all digitize, then it becomes beneficial to all of us. The second is the parish model. There has been a lot of conversation around the parish model, and one of the things that I can tell you is that if we think that the parish model is our new way of accelerating development, we need to think about giving it time. If it is an experiment, I always tell people that the American democratic experience has taken over 200 years, and they are still at it. If we think it is the way we want to go, please let's support it. But I want to emphasize that it is important that we focus on parishes that do well. If we get 20 parishes doing well this year, then we put a shine on them, then next year we'll get more and more and more as we go along. Finally, the SDG Secretariat is a welcome development. I mean, I was able to go to the regional conferences in Hoima and in Guru. And one of the things that I was hearing was local authorities were saying, come to us, we want to engage. We want to integrate these agendas into our development planning processes. I also want to say that indeed, when you do a good job, then you are given more job. So it will be useful that the Secretariat considers pushing an agenda that allows also to take on the role of the African Union Agenda 2063. But I want to conclude by saying that I think the Secretariat also gives us an opportunity to begin to identify what investments all the players are undertaking in relation to SDGs, mapping out their investments so far and negotiating what more investments can be done across board. Finally, I want to thank the government for inviting me and my bosses, UNDP, for inviting me, and I also want to thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frederick Mugisha, who is the SDG Integration Advisor for the African Region, UNDP. And we are live, ladies and gentlemen, on UBC, Uganda Broadcasting Corporation, Inspiring Uganda. And as we continue and get closer to a wrap-up of the second day of the first annual SDG conference, we will later on be able to have are key messages that have come out of the conference through the panels, the parallel panels that we have had, and the high-level discussion panels that we've had right here. So we're going to have another panel discussion right about now that is going to particularly look at local authorities delivering on the SDG promise. Remember when the speaker was here earlier on in the morning, the Right Honorable Anita Among, she stressed the point that she wants to have such a conference held in some village, maybe in Omoro or whichever countryside it is, just to be able to get the feel and discussion of those people. There is a gentleman yesterday in the audience who said in part of the comments that the people at the grassroots level say we speak a lot of English in such, and never really get to realize that the people down need to have these messages simplified and broken down easily for their own understanding. And probably, yes, the SDG Secretariat, Dr. Byamgisha here, I think did hear that message, right? So next time we will be in some village somewhere enjoying very much good fresh breath. So allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to invite none other than the moderator for this session, Mr. Richard Sewachirianga. We talk about decentralization and bringing power down, and having the people from the grassroots also contributing. We want to look at that, local authorities delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. A round of applause for Mr. Richard Sewachirianga to take on the panel.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you are all welcome to this afternoon session. We are going to make it lively so that there is no competition between what you ate and what you are listening to. So there will be certainly energy up here to make sure that things move very quickly. So for this session, we are going to be talking about local authorities and how they are delivering on the SDG promise, of course, within the context of what we have laid out since the first time when we started, which is how do we accelerate. And to do this, I have a panel of really very experienced persons who have been at this game for long. But before I invite them, I think a couple of things need to be underscored. I don't know how many of you have been around, but at least me, I've been around since the Millennium Development Goals, when they were being passed. And within that, I think one of the things that was done was to identify mostly the critical gaps that needed to be focused on. And one gap that was there was the infrastructure to deliver the MDGs at the time was not in the discussion. But during the work on the post-2015, which then gave birth to the SDGs, one of the things that the local authorities and regional governments across the world did was really to push for why local authorities should be central to delivering the SDGs. And I think for now, the latest analysis shows that actually for local authorities, if they are to deliver and be part of the SDGs, we can actually be able to meet 100 out of the 169 targets. Now that is a very powerful metric that I think we should all celebrate. But for that to happen, there are a number of initiatives that have to happen at the local level. Things like local, voluntary local reviews. Uganda has already done 10. The SDG Secretariat has been leading that discussion. And a few other areas where we can unlock the bottlenecks at the local level. So what we are going to do this afternoon is not to have presentations, but we are going to have a really an interactive discussion around what are the things we need to do to actually accelerate the achievement of SDGs within the local governments, but using the local governments as a framework to do that. So to help me to the stage. Then I also have two other persons who will be joining. Ms. Gertrude Rose Gamwera, the Secretary General of the East African Local Governments Association. She will be joining us. I think she must be somewhere in the house or coming. And then also we'll be joined by the Acting Secretary General for the Uganda Local Governments Authority, Madame Josephine Kalege, who will be talking to us about the role of local governments in strengthening local governance. So you are all welcome. Oh, I hadn't seen you, Gertrude. Apologies. But please, you are welcome, and then we shall start. And you can see that my panel is a very progressive panel. Rita won't have a problem with my panel. Having said that, we are now going to kick off the discussion. You can sit one seat away from Honorable, and then we can kick off. Yes. Yeah. I think we should all go one seat that direction so that I can join you. Yes, one seat, one seat, one seat. Thank you. So we'll start the discussion, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you very much. So to start us off, we'll have then Ms. Edlam Abera Yemeru to speak to us about the regional voluntary local review guidelines and how they help local authorities in the SDG implementation and monitoring. As I said, Uganda has already done 10 of them, and probably we will have an opportunity in future to actually share the insights from those ones. But we want to hear from Madame Yemeru, who is online. So Madame Yemeru, the online floor is yours. You have a live as well as a virtual audience, so you are welcome to start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I do hope you can hear me. I was trying to put my video on, but I am unable to do so. So if the hosts could kindly put the video on, then I would be able to be seen to you. In any case, Excellencies, distinguished participants, representatives of government, different organizations, I'm glad to be here with you today. I am coming to join you from the UN Economic Commission for Africa as indicated, where I am the director for the Gender Policy Division. I am particularly pleased to be here with you today because ECA is very proud to have been, to have supported, in fact, the first VLR, local review in Uganda, conducted by Ngora District. So it's really fantastic to see the way in which voluntary local reviews have been scaled up in Uganda, and now 10 voluntary local reviews have been conducted. So it's really an honor for me to be here with you today. I have a presentation, but I will not take too much time in the PowerPoint, given the guidance, given that we want this to be a lively conversation. I think really I want to make 2 points through this presentation. The first is that in case there is a question of how do we conduct voluntary local reviews of the SDGs and Agenda 2063, Africa has defined its own approach and methodology. This is a guideline that has been developed drawing partly on the experience of Ngora District and 4 other localities we supported to conduct VLRs in Africa: Accra in Accra in Ghana, Yaoundé in Cameroon, Harare in Zimbabwe, and also Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. So the guideline is based on these experiences and VLR processes. African member states requested ECA and partners to develop a guideline that is adapted to Africa and Africa's specificities. Although there are a number of global guidelines on how to conduct VLRs, African member states were of the view that we need a region-specific guideline. One of the reasons, of course, is that we have contextual, specific issues that need to be considered in conducting local reviews, including data issues and other considerations. Also, Africa has to review the SDGs together with Agenda 2063. So these Africa-specific conditions make it important that we have an Africa-specific guideline. And so we have that. And the main message really that I want is that the guideline is there, is extremely detailed. It defines 3 main phases on how to volunteer review as a local government, starting from the initial conceptualization and stakeholder mobilization to a prioritization of what each locality would like to review, the VLR process, of course, data collection, but all the way to the preparation of a report. But much more importantly, I want to emphasize the last phase. A key message is that voluntary local reviews are important in terms of process, but ultimately, VLRs should be able to influence plans, strategies, and actions of the local. So this guideline is very detailed, as I mentioned. Next slide. It provides a very user-friendly template, can be applied in the VLR process. Next slide. It's very practical, easy to follow. It shares some key lessons from VLRs in other parts of Africa. Next slide. And it provides very simple but useful tools for different stages of the local review, including stakeholder mapping. Next slide. Stakeholder engagement strategies. Next slide. Also looking at alignment between a local government or locality's own priorities and the SDGs and Agenda 2063. That alignment is really quite fundamental. It's important to consider to what extent our local plans and strategies align with the SDGs and Agenda 2063, and what does that mean in terms of priority actions and intervention. Next. So these are just similar tools that I would not talk too much. Next. Next, yes, here, just emphasizing that data and statistics is quite important for local reviews. We know that the availability of data and statistics at the local level is quite a challenge. It should not preclude or stop localities from conducting voluntary local reviews. But it's important to the extent possible to integrate data into the review process. So the Africa Guideline also provides some very specific tools on how to ensure robust data and statistical processes in local review. Next. African member states asked ECA and partners to develop a guide, but they also emphasize the importance of peer reviews among local governments within countries but across the continent. And so in this respect, the guideline also provides some very specific tools and methodologies for peer review within a country, but also across Africa. Next. These are some of the tools in the guideline that help peer review process. Let's proceed. Here, what I want to emphasize is that Africa as a regional commission, as a regional commission, is in the process of developing a PLR, peer review platform for Africa. The purpose is to connect local reviews of the SDGs and Agenda 2063 across the continent. And the platform will be providing an opportunity for peer exchange and review as local reviews are conducted. It will be a space to share stories from VLR processes or African localities. We will also integrate mechanisms to foster dialogue and discussion. It will be a platform to share tools and resources on reviews and in general serve as a repository for African voluntary local review. This is what is available currently. So I think this provides a very strong foundation to continue supporting local reviews in Uganda, but across the continent. And every year at the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, as Africa meets to review the SDGs, we organize a joint voluntary national review and voluntary local review workshop. So we're ensuring to build linkages between voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews. And this is why it's really great to see how the Uganda SDG Secretariat is a core actor in localizing the SDGs and Agenda 63, and therefore building strong linkages between VNRs and VLRs. Now, just to close, I cannot overemphasize the importance of reviews. I think this was already highlighted, but it's clear now that without adequate local action and progress at the local level, we may not be able to deliver the SDGs at Agenda 2063. So local reviews are very important tools and mechanisms to ensure that indeed we are monitoring progress at the local level, but also ensure that local governments are in a position to deliver the action and the services that are necessary to meet the SDGs and Agenda 2063. So final slide, just the previous guess, is to show here that the Africa Voluntary Local Guidelines are available in English and French. As I said, it's very user-friendly. And we are designing a training module on this guideline. So there's no question about how to conduct VLRs. The resources are there. And finally, just to share that CA does have an online website where we share all of the information, all of these materials. And of course, we stand ready to continue working with Uganda as the VLR movement is scaled up, especially, as I said, given that we have been your partner right from the beginning of this journey in Uganda. Thank you very much. I will leave it there.
A big hand clap, ladies and gentlemen, for Madame Meru. I think she has touched on some of the critical elements in the guideline itself and how that can be helpful. So what we are going to do is not to discuss the guideline only, but I'm going to now turn it over to the practitioners who will then help us to understand what really we can do with these kinds of elements. Now, one thing which I know is always a challenge, especially when you come to local governments, is the whole question of representative data. So you have lots of challenges, mostly when it comes to saying, Kumi and this data represents the district. I think up to now, the Bureau of Statistics may not have profiles that are fully representative at a local government level. And so what I'll do is, let me start with Gertrude, because Gertrude is a historical in these matters, to really just break it down for us, especially around now what you are seeing, both at the regional level, but also what you understand from your own experience, how this process of localization of SDGs and working at the local level can be further strengthened. So over to you for about 3 or 4 minutes, because I want to go back and forth on several issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. And I would like to start off with an acknowledgement and a word of appreciation to the Office of the Prime Minister, particularly through the SDG Secretariat, for the invitation extended to have me here and share experiences on a very important theme that remains at the heart of local government service delivery, which is SDGs and the localization agenda in particular. So thank you so much, Dr. Albert, and perhaps I should say thank you for keeping up this team, the journey we started while here in Uganda, and I'm glad to see the milestones, Richard, that have been made through the report that has gone on since yesterday. I'm coming from the perspective of now relating with local government brothers and sisters on the East African community scene. And I'll start also with a word that was shared before as we came on, when it was mentioned that the Honorable Speaker called for, she made a wish if such a conference could take place in a village. And for me, as I walked here, what resonated in mind was it takes a village to build a nation. And that statement resonates very well with what the previous speaker has said, that unless we get adequate local action taking place, then we will have challenges delivering on the SDGs agenda. I also want to tie it in with what the professor said in terms of accelerators, that there are three focus areas, which is focus, multiplier, and having scale. And without a doubt, local governments represent this. So having said that, I'd like to share that perhaps the statements and discussions that have gone on previously and yesterday up to now clearly resonate with what we are seeing at the regional level, which is much of the SDGs action, the progression that is being made is happening, but mostly at national level, and we need to accelerate the localization agenda. Our moderator, our MC, if I should say, said that somebody yesterday said that the local people want these things simplified. Professor Freud said that the local governments are saying, come to us. It means something is yet to be done. And this is reflected even at the regional level. The East African Local Governments Association, which brings together the family of associations of the EAC member states, did a baseline on the localization agenda in 2020. And clearly, I think and I believe that we share similarities across the span in terms of localization. Governments need to go down in the region entirely. We need to go down and bring the local governments on board, and particularly the things that continue to be talked about in terms of getting the leaders on board. I noted in a report for Uganda, there's also efforts to work with the parliamentarians. But when we are talking about people-centeredness in East Africa, we are looking at the individual person who votes that parliamentarian, the individual who votes the local leader, whose voice should be on board. So we want even the local government leaders themselves, beyond parliamentarians, coming on board to champion the localization of the SDGs process, which means investments have to go into the local government institutions, and in particular the oversight functions as well. Community awareness remains key. We see efforts are there, but we need simplicity, and that goes across the region as well. I could show there's some attempts like ourselves here in Uganda. I think there was an attempt with the support of UNDP, UNCDF to translate materials into local governments. That is very good, and I hope it has taken milestones. In Rwanda as well, they continue to localize, to translate the materials they use to make sense to the citizenry. But we need to break it down further. As the presenter online was speaking about the guideline, I kept on being challenged now. We need to make those tools simpler so that we can generate that data. Richard, you talked about data, and she talked about data and statistics. We know the kind of human resource we have in local governments. If they were to bring you a planner today and you looked at the qualification, you wouldn't even, without a doubt, wonder why we're having issues of generating data. But at the same time, we need to also own and correlate it with the data at national level. They seem not to be coordinated and speaking the same. So it's important that things are made easier. But also local governments need to be capacitated, and this is across the region as well, to be able to harness and mobilize their stakeholders, to engage them across the board, the private sector, the civil society, the academia. There's a lot of silo approach there. And so as we work on accelerating, we need to harness that resource and bring the voices together and the efforts together so that the agenda can happen much more faster if we are going to hit the 2030 deadline. We have only 7 years left, and that is quite a bit of concern. We have the national development plans talking about alignment across the board, even in East Africa. But what is missing is the reflection of the local priorities. And increasingly, we are seeing a lot of push down from top, and the local priorities are not speaking to the national priorities are not really speaking to the local priorities. And perhaps that could be an issue to look at as you look at accelerating the SDGs agenda at local level, because the local priorities speak to the priorities, what people feel will cause change in their lives, and that should be able to be addressed, and it will automatically, of course, speak to the goals in one way or another across the divide of the local and county governments. In Kenya, we talk about county governments. Coordination is also very important. We see quite good structures at national level. Kenya has a very strong SDG coordination system as well. But when you get to the counties and local governments, there is need to build the institutional capacity around coordination so that everybody who is acting on the SDGs agenda is in sync with what is happening at the local level. And lastly, the big one, we should not get tired of hearing, is resourcing. Fiscal resourcing is very, very important. Yesterday, I looked at our budget here in Uganda, and I see a little bit of celebration about the increment of the direct allocations to local governments from 4.5 to 5.1 trillion. That's around 500 added. Is that adequate? I tried to unpack it a bit. It looks like more of wages for PDM, and I'm saying we are still not funding local governments enough if we are going to make sure that SDGs are going to be attained. And it's across the board. Of course, there are a bit of improvements in other regions. We see people in Burundi, the communes in Burundi, trying to be a little bit more specific. They try to do projections, 10-year budgets for SDGs in particular, and give it a vote. And that kind of informs on what amount of money is needed to go to that local government or commune as it is. So that could be kind of a practice we could look to be able to accelerate the SDGs. I could stop there for now, Richard.
Yes, I'll come back to you. There are a couple of things you've said. One of them is if there was a local government here, they would not like it. And that is the fact that you say the planners' qualifications.
Yes, yes.
But since you are nodding like you are standing by it, I'll come back to that issue. Now, Josephine, I know that the Uganda Local Governments Authorities is now grappling with an interesting statistic, which is that in Uganda, whenever we have elections, you sort of have about 80% or even more new leaders every election cycle. And that for SDGs has become an issue. I want to hear from you how you are embracing the huge numbers of new leaders and sort of bringing them on track to SDGs. And yet these are probably, as you said, they are only 7 years. What are the things that Olga would like to do to sort of see acceleration? But also, if you could tell us a little bit about any specific issues that have emerged out of COVID for local governments, especially in dealing with the SDGs. Over to you, Josephine.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Sawachianga. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to observe protocol. Good afternoon to you all. I'd like to take this opportunity to appreciate the Office of the Prime Minister and the SDG Secretariat for giving us an opportunity as local governments and our umbrella Uganda Local Government Association to be part of this first national SDG conference in Uganda. As the moderator has brought it my attention, yes, we've gone through the elections, and actually statistics are very clear that across all the local governments, the turnover was very high. We look at almost 90% are new leaders into government business, local government business, and actually, whereas they are mandated to deliver services to the constituencies, the people of Uganda. So an issue that I want to bring to this conference or to the members is the local governments are the epicenter of service delivery, and once they are fully capacitated, they are able to deliver. But when you look at the cross-section of the district chairpersons, these are the political leaders in the local governments. And when you look at the 134 district chairpersons, or we commonly look at the LC5 chairpersons, out of the 134, 20 only were able to come back. So these are they have the experience of how they've been running business within the local governments for the last 5 years. They have been councillors, all within the local government fraternity. So as much as we are taking on the mantle to ensure that we are creating awareness, we are localizing SDGs within our local governments, there is already an indicator of a capacity gap within the leadership, because the community is always for the leader. If the leadership does not fully understand what an SDG is, we have 7 SDGs with 169 targets or goals. If they don't understand how, there's really going to be a challenge in localizing. We are struggling as local governments to make awareness and also to enable people understand that the SDGs is not a separate project. It is something that has been in. We are trying to localize it, look at health, look at poverty, look at hunger, look at clean water. All these are part and parcel of us, but how can we bring them to be able, in terms of reporting, in terms of monitoring, and actually ownership for sustainability? I have to assure you that the induction is still lacking in the local governments on the issue of the SDG. It is something that, especially with the political wing. I was happy yesterday when the direct Mr. Albert talked about the literate with the members of parliament as champion of SDGs. But we must remember that the SDG localization is at the local government, right from the village, come to the parish, the sub-counties, to the district level. So unless we bring on board fully the local leadership to embrace and fully understand their roles in localizing the SDGs, the implementation, when it comes to planning, these are some of the issues, the gaps that we are likely to face and which is likely to affect service delivery. When we look at local governments, we are supposed to do the district development plans. As my SG here, because I'm stepping in her shoes, has said, the local governments are supposed to come up with district development plans. Yesterday we noted that NDP is aligned, 90% is aligned to the SDG. So local governments, as we are developing our district development plans, we are supposed to align them to the NDP3. But without them understanding fully, getting the right information in terms of data collection and seeing what are the decisions we can make to allocate maybe this amount of money for the health program, this kind of money to the education programs. These are some of the issues that are likely to affect service delivery in Uganda. So I would pray that as we are talking about localizing the SDGs within the perspective of local governments, central government has to do more in building the capacities. First of all, let's induct all the leadership across, bring them on board. I would think, I appreciate, as we looked at the members of parliament, the priority would have been brought to the lower local governments first, because when you talk about the parish development model, how are we incorporating in the SDGs? How is the community at the parish level, at the village level, understanding that goal 1 of the SDG is actually aligned to the long-awaited parish development model, and what could be their role? What could be the role of the district chairperson, the sub-county chairperson, we call the LC3, in this agenda as we go up. Then also we talk about issue of information. As local governments, we try our best to raise awareness to the citizens to understand the issue of SDGs and how it's benefiting. That is trying a way of accelerating SDG implementation. But when you look at the information within the local governments, it's still wanting. Yes, we appreciate the translation in the 12 languages, but when you look at the cross-section of all the regions, as ULGA, we actually have 5 regions. Karamoja could be part of the northern region, but we take it as a special region. Have we gotten the communities in these 5 regions, even at the sub-county level, to fully understand the issue of SDG localization and how it's benefiting their day-to-day lives? It is something that we need to address both as local government and central government, and also in terms of financing. We are not going to realize the localization of SDGs, ladies and gentlemen, unless we breach the fiscal space. Yes, we appreciate the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has affected our economy. But we need also to think, when you look outside on how can we ensure that the resources are available, or during the allocations, the money is given to the local governments to be able to deliver services to the people. Currently, I want to draw your attention to the national budget that was read recently. Look at what was allocated to the local governments. Only 5 trillion out of the 48. And when you break down, as the SG Irago has mentioned, you look at the 5 trillion that has been given. In terms of percentage, we could be at around at 9%. And this money is more tagged on wages and salaries. And even the wages you are looking at are not motivating enough for these people to take the mantle to localize the SDGs. So little money is left for the programs in terms of zero hunger, in terms of water access, clean water, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of quality education, in terms of education. So we need to find alternative ways of funding for local governments. Mm-hmm. Local governments are struggling to raise local revenue. The collections, because of COVID-19, many of the revenue sources have crippled. How is government, central government, supporting the local governments in terms of capacity building to enable them to find alternative, innovative ways of raising local revenue to boost the central government transfers? Because we realize that the money that comes from the center, both the conditional and unconditional grants, is more of wage, but little is left to service delivery. And that is where we are looking at localizing SDGs for improving service delivery. So as ULGA, the voice of local governments, we are saying, and we are resounding it to central government, that support the local governments. Because when you talk about these peer reviews, the actions that local governments, the commitment that local governments are putting in to ensure that they implement the SDGs will be realized if they are fully empowered, if they are retooled. Okay. We talked about the planners who don't have the capacity, if they are brought on board and they fully understand and they are able to maneuver with the district development plans and align them to the NDP3 and the SDG agenda.
Thank you, Josephine. I'm going to ask you and Gertrude a question. Are there models that work? Or are there models that are working? Because I know that sometimes when we get into a discussion on local governments, we sort of, the books they referred to yesterday, we go straight into the lamentation. And I think that we need to also ask the question, because in Uganda, people are going to challenge us and say, you have been on this SDG journey, on this localization journey. Our decentralization is 1993 when we started. So people are asking, with this kind of mature decentralization, what models are out there that are working? But that I want you to prepare properly, so I'm going to first talk to Honorable, and then I come back to you. Now, Honorable, you have listened to the discussions around what's happening at the local level. Of course, you sit in Parliament, but you represent a locality. And, but the good thing is that you also come from an SDG platform that you put us as Parliament. So a couple of things which I would want you to reflect on is, one, on the side of the Parliament itself and your work on SDGs. How do you see yourself engaging with some of these local governments? That's one. But also, bringing their voice into the main Parliament. But also as a person who comes from a constituency that you represent, what do you see as some of the things, priorities that we should focus on if we are to implement the SDG agenda? So over to you.
Thank you so much. Like you did mention, I'm Silas Augon, MP representing the people of Kumi Municipality in the 11th Parliament. And by God's grace, this is my second term of office. So I thank God for that. Somebody was talking about the attrition rate for the leaders. I think Parliament was not spared And I think over 65% members of parliament of the 10th parliament did return. So that should be known. So it is not easy, and it's a challenge because we keep on going back to land, yet there are people who have already learned. So
Honorable, the Vice President has arrived, so there could be a disruption in this session. We'll give it a small moment, and then we shall come back to the discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can all see that the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda is here. So I kindly request that we will stand up and welcome her. Let's all stand up and welcome the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda. Let's all stand up and welcome the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, Her Excellency Jessica Alupo. Thank you so much, Madam, for sparing time to be with us off your busy schedule. Welcomed, of course, by the State Minister, General Duties, and the team, who is also the focal person, of course, of the Sustainable Development Goals. We can take our seats now together with the Vice President. Thank you so much for your time. And Your Excellency, by the time you did arrive, welcomed, of course, by the UN Resident Coordinator, Ms. Susan Ngongi Namondo. That was the very person who welcomed you. We were just concluding with a panel discussion that is basically addressing local authorities delivering on Sustainable Development Goals promise. Earlier on, when we did have the speaker, she made a wish that probably at some point in time we'll have such a kind of conversation in a village setting. And I will request and beg your indulgence, Your Excellency, that you give us the next 20 minutes, and we will be winding up this particular panel right here that is moderated by Mr. Richard Sewachirianga, and then we will have you and the focal point Minister for SDGs get to close this. So Mr. Sewachirianga, I get back to you.
Thank you very much, and very warm welcome to the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. On the panel, you have Honorable, who is coming from the SDG Secretariat, Honorable Silas Augun. And then you have Gertrude Gamwera from the East African Local Government Authorities, and then Josephine Kalege from the Uganda Local Government Authorities, and I'm Richard Sewachirianga, the panelist. We are listening to Honorable, breaking it down in terms of how the Parliament would want to engage with this issue of SDGs. Please go ahead, Honorable.
Thank you, and I would love to add my voice in welcoming Her Excellency the Vice President. You're most welcome. And I was so excited at the start of this panel. There was that performance by the troupe, and they did our local song, Ikonkokeyaune Mali. Your Excellency, the team did very well. How I wish they did a piece of just 1 second. You would appreciate. I was so excited.
Barakora matakera minarara, barakora matakera. matakera minara papa. Bale bale matakera minara papa. Chakorida, ikoniko kaya unema. Aya unema lore. Ya. Chakorida, ikoniko kaya unema. Aya uneka sore. Ya. Chakorida, ikoniko kaya unema. Aya unema lore. Ya.
Thank you.
Chakorida.
Thank you. Your Excellency, I had to break the rules of procedure a little to allow them to do that because I know it is right in your heart and you love that song. Yeah. So like I said, I'm Silas Aukon, Member of Parliament representing the people of Kumi Municipality, and I'm also the Vice Chair of the SDGs Forum in the Parliament of Uganda. It is a forum, it's not a committee of Parliament, so there has to be a clear distinction between the two. This is not a formal committee of Parliament, but it brings together those who are like-minded, people who have interest in championing the matters of SDGs. And every time I wake up, I count and ask how many years are left to 2030. Are we about? Are we there? I get worried when I check the budget in regards to water, whether we are there or not. In regards to poverty, whether we are there or not. Hunger. So allow me to go local because I represent locals. I come from Ukumi. Kumi is remote. You've got to travel well over 280 kilometers from here to reach my district. But ask the question, how do these local governments engage with the parliament? How does parliament engage them? And you know that the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda gives parliament and also members of parliament basically 4 issues to handle. One of them is representation. We've got to be the voice of the people. The second one is legislation. We make the laws. The third one is appropriation. We cut the cake. The fourth one is oversight. We are the watchdog. But Your Excellency and the team that is gathered here, what matters a lot is the linkage between the parliament, the national parliament, and the local parliaments. Because my belief is that, first of all, at the districts, the so-called councils actually should have also been called district parliaments, so that people get to know that there has to be a better coordination and linkage between the center and the local. And then too, we need now to orient our approach of doing work as parliament towards SDGs. So I say so because when we represent people, the language that we use must now sound SDG. When we are doing oversight, let us ask questions that rotate around SDGs. When we are legislating, let's ask questions and provide provisions that cater for SDGs. Whatever we do as parliament must now be focused towards SDGs because time is not on our side. Time is running, but we are walking. That is the challenge. Time is running, but we are working. There is no other person to do it better than Parliament. Because I can tell you, the executive and the judiciary also depend on Parliament. The output from that house is what helps the rest. Yes, the president is commander-in-chief, but Parliament has to make a lot of decisions. So Parliament here becomes critical. And more so when it comes to issues of capacity building for local governments. I thought that is an area that we need to focus on. Do our councils know what they are supposed to do? Are they able to ask questions around SDGs? Are they aligning their budgets to the NDP 3? Are they even aware and alert about issues of Agenda 2063? Are they aware about Agenda 2030? Do they know what the NRM promised to them at the time of campaign? Those are some of the questions. The various platforms, frameworks, are they alert to that? And I thought Parliament has a duty of connecting local governments to the center. Your Excellency and other participants, there is an issue of budgeting. Indeed, Parliament does allocate resources. But I think as a country, we need now to focus our attention on making sure that most of the resources indeed go down. Because as we talk right now, I think we are now budgeting for administration
most especially, and most of the resources are staying at the center. We need to see these resources go to local governments. And for us as Parliament, how do we connect to the people? We use committees. Parliament does oversight through committees. We go to the field, we check what is happening there, we pick people's voices, those signals are brought to the House, we make reports, recommendations, we push to government. But besides that, even our mere forum on SDGs does its work. We try our best to reach out to the people. But even as members of Parliament individually, you know, for me, my vehicle is like a public address system. When I go to my constituency, where I park it, people gather immediately. So that gathering gives me an opportunity to engage with the people. Leave alone the councils, the local person. So I think what matters is what is it that comes from me to the people in regard to SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I think those were very insightful perspectives around how you can support the local governments and what you can do at the level of Parliament. But Josephine, I think now you have thought about our question. Where are things working? Are there any models out there that where you are seeing some interesting progress that is happening in terms of achieving the SDG targets within the local governments?
Allow me to add my voice to welcome Your Excellency, the Vice President of Uganda, and the Honorable Minister of General Duties Office of the Prime Minister, and also the district guests to this conference. As Mr. Sawachiyanga, you said, in the local governments, where are we seeing it working? What are the models? Yes, as I said, when we are localizing the SDGs in Uganda or in our respective local governments, we are not sampling one, goal 1 or SDG 1 or SDG 5. We are looking at all SDGs holistically. We are giving everything a priority, every goal a priority in our respective local governments. And we are also not working in isolation. We are looking at what is the major focus of government as we are looking within our local governments, and what are the priorities, what are the issues that are coming from the citizens as we are doing our budgeting. When the local governments are doing their district development plans, they look into the issues coming from the respective communities and also align them in their respective budgets to inform the implementation, the joint monitoring, and ensuring that we achieve in line with the SDG, which are well aligned to the NDP3 and also the district development plans. So we are looking at a number of models as we are implementing the SDGs. We are looking at, now that we have now the current model of the parish development model, that is actually looking at addressing SDG number 1, the end poverty. As local government, we are putting efforts. How can we ensure, right from both the political and the technical team, to ensure that we achieve this? We ensure that money comes in the households, money comes in the hands of the wananchi, the person at the lower local government. This is at the village level, at the parish level. So we also have the Myoga that we are also looking at. It's a government program, but within the local governments as another government. How are we ensuring that we work as a team as local governments to ensure that the communities are benefiting from all these programs, which are well aligned in our district development plans, and also across, even up to the lower local government level. So the issue, as we said, as local governments are grappling to ensure that we improve service delivery, we localize the SDGs. We are constrained in a number of ways. We are not here to lament, but to say the reality. The financing component is limiting the local governments. Local governments would have loved to ensure that we have everything it desires to empower the local community, the household person, to have all they desire to have quality health facilities, quality education. But when you look at the money that is given for service delivery in the local governments, it's minimal. That's why I said, Your Excellency, in the morning, that local governments need to be empowered in terms of alternative financing. Local revenue mobilization, management, and collection should be strengthened. We need to automate. As we get this money, it should be put into value. Maybe it could contribute greatly to the national cake, what comes from central government in terms of transfers to what we have within the local governments, and we are able to implement services. As the Honorable Member of Parliament has said, we have a lot of money that is retained at the center. The money, we feel that this money is for service delivery, because when you look at the allocation that is given to the local governments in terms of localizing the SDGs, that is implementing, it is wage and salaries, operations. But money is retained at the center, that we feel once we enforce and ensure that money moves to the local governments, service delivery will be improved, and also the localization of the agenda, as we are, of the SDG agenda, and when we are in terms of reporting, it will be well aligned. Let's build the capacities of local governments. Yes, I appreciate, as Luga Fraternity, we appreciate the regional engagements that were held in Mbale, in Hoima, and Gulu. We are grateful because you are able to hear the voices of local governments, the practical, how are they appreciating the SDG localization. Our prayers, Ulga, is let them be regular. Let's also target the lower local governments. Let them understand and appreciate that when you are implementing the parish development model, it is aligned to NDP3, it is aligned to the SDG agenda, it is aligned to SDG 2023. They understand in their local way, they own this program, and they will be part of the national development agenda of Uganda. So I think if that is well done, the financing is improved. And also as local governments, we also pledge to bridge the leakages within the local government fraternity. I know a lot could be happening here and here, but we shall also, with your support, we shall improve and see how we can work together to improve service delivery to the people, and in terms of localizing the SDG, because when you look at the SDGs, all the 17, this is exactly what is the community is looking forward. The service delivery programs in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of security. Yes, local governments also play a crucial role in ensuring that they enable the environment, they level the environment in terms of peace and security. Because we also have security meetings in districts to ensure that when we get partners, when programs are in within our local governments, there is security. Because without security and peace, progress and in terms of development will not be realized. So that is also another contribution that the local governments are putting in as a priority to ensure that every now and then there is stability in the local governments to accelerate the SDG implementation, and also to accelerate development from the top, that is at national, from to the district level, and to the lowest local government. That is what I...
Thank you. Thank you very much, Josephine. I think that's very helpful. I hear you that things like a Myoga and the PDM hold some promise. Now, very quickly, before I take, just I see 3 hands, and I'll take only those 3. Just tell us 1 or 2 models you have seen Gertrude around the corner within the region, or even here in Uganda.
Thank you so much. Richard, in terms of models for SDG acceleration and implementation, I would quickly send you to Kenya. Because I think they have really harnessed the art of getting it down at local level, the way they are bringing on board the county governments. And the advantage they have, I will also refer to what you said. We've been at the game of decentralization for long. So why are we still, did you say lamenting? I could say they went full blast into devolution. They empowered the county government to be in charge, and they acknowledged that. And they let them drive whatever effort is happening at that level. For us in Uganda, our decentralization was beautiful. Actually, they came and learned from us and went and made it more beautiful. We had a beautiful, I'd call it honeymoon, the first 15 years. Beautiful, pre-testing, making sure devolution works. But the last 15 years have been a struggle. We tended to lean more on delegation, which kind of centralized power and control, and that creates challenges for local government discretion to act in the direction they should be in terms of realizing the main mandate. So perhaps as Ugandans, we need to reflect again on where we want to take our decentralization. It should be that devolution principle in our constitution. And therefore, I think in terms of accelerating, for me, we need to go back and look at our sister in Kenya and see how do we even make it better than what they took home and made better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I have been alerted that our time is fast spent because we do have a key messages session that is coming, and the Vice President, of course, we don't want to eat into her time. But I think to really just conclude, I don't know if you have one word, just so that we can conclude and then.
Thank you. To conclude it, we need to see that increased information sharing between the parliament and the local governments, and then the participation of members of parliament in the day-to-day activities of districts, of local governments. That is the key in terms of planning and whatever. And then media engagements at the local level so that people get to know what is happening. And then finally, concrete oversight. Parliament needs to be the watchdog that is available to watch what is happening. Allocating resources is one thing, but having that resource get the necessary output is another. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Online we have our colleague Yemeru. Are you still there? If you have any last words of reflection, we would be happy to hear from you before we close this session. It looks like maybe the line dropped or something, but I think from what you have said, certainly local authorities and delivering the promise on SDGs is something that we have to pay attention to. The questions of simplification, further localization, increasing the resource envelope at local level, engaging more with many more other partners, linking up with the parliament. I think all those seem to be critical in terms of us achieving the SDG promise. So I think with that, I want to ask that you give our colleagues, okay, our online colleague is there. Let's give her a chance to give us her last word, and then we will close.
Thank you so much. I was facing a technical difficulty in terms of connecting. Just very, very quickly, what I would want to say is I appreciate all the interventions from other panelists and other representatives. I do think that when we speak about localizing the SDGs, we should think about localizing the entire ecosystem of action around the SDGs, and in fact, national development for that matter, and national development planning, whereby localization and local authorities need to be fully integrated from design to prioritization to implementation to monitoring. We're discussing monitoring, but we need to think about the entire ecosystem. Local governments should be involved, should be at the table, and local agendas should be prioritized as relevant and also financed as indicated. Secondly, local finances. I think it's really important to also begin to shift from dependence to independence. Local governments and local economies are actually very wealthy. The right systems and support mechanisms are in place. So how do we shift from a dependency on national transfers to own source revenues and other local revenues, sustaining localities and sustaining and financing service delivery at the local level? My final point is that we've discussed local reviews and reporting. They mean nothing unless they influence action. So I think thinking about going from reporting to actioning and actions is quite fundamental. Over. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yemeru. Thank you very much, Josephine, Gertrude, and Honorable Silas Ongom. for all your perspectives. I think the last keywords which you have heard from Emeru are very interesting, from dependence to independence, as well as supporting an ecosystem beyond just supporting small silos. So thank you very much, colleagues, and we'll move on to the next session. Thank you.
A bigger round of applause to our moderator and the panelists. Earlier on, one of the panelists actually mentioned a thing that we ought to pay attention to, and he's a parliamentarian. He said that we are walking and yet the time is running. That means we need to move as fast as the time itself, because any time that is lost, we cannot be able to recover it. Your Excellency, as I call the Minister General Duties to come and speak to us, she will also be giving us a conference outcome document before she invites me. Allow me to introduce to you our UN family that is present. You are seated right next to the UN Resident Coordinator and Designated Security Official, Ms. Susan Ngongi Namondo. We also do have the Deputy Resident, the Deputy Rep of the UNDP, Ms. Sheila Ngatia. You could just wave to us right there. We also do have Ms. Adikemi Ndiele seated right next to us. She is the Rep UN Women. Earlier on, we had Dr. Munir, the Rep UNICEF, wondering whether Dr. Munir is still here. I think he just stepped out. And of course, Dr. Mary Otieno, UNFPA country rep as well, was with us earlier on in the morning. So ladies and gentlemen, there's been quite a lot of discussion from the Office of the Prime Minister. It is a promise and commitment that this will be an annual conference, so we can be able to find out what progress we have made in that year and be able to devise means and new models on how we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And out of all those discussions, the key highlights that did come through, the Speaker also promised that she would avail the Minister General Duties, who is also the focal minister for SDGs, time in Parliament to be able to present, together with the UN Resident Coordinator, to present to Parliament how best legislation and appropriation can be done in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. And ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, allow me invite the Minister General Duties, Right Honorable Kasule Lumumba, who is also the focal minister for the Sustainable Development Goals, who will speak to us about the key messages and outcome of the conference, and later on invite our chief guest to close this particular afternoon. A round of applause for her.
Your Excellency, with your permission, allow me remove the masks. I'm far away from everybody. Your Excellency Jessica Rose Epere Alupo, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, the UN Resident Coordinator and the UN family members, heads of diplomatic, head of public service and secretary to cabinet, permanent secretaries, heads of diplomatic missions and agencies, representatives from the private sector, civil society, Interreligious Council, media, the SDG Secretariat headed by Dr. Albert Byamugisha. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me take this opportunity to welcome Her Excellency to our conference. Can we clap for her? We want to thank you that you have accorded us time as we look at the SDGs. Your Excellency, when you look at the SDGs, whenever you chair a cabinet, you handle one SDG with any item on the agenda is an SDG. So you've come to really see that you have another team that is always following whatever you do in the cabinet under your chair as you deliberate on issues that fall under the different SDGs. We've invited the right person. Can we clap for her once again? Your Excellency, with your indulgence, allow me bring you on board on issues that we have been able to handle since we started on the 8th of this month. The first annual SDG conference was held yesterday and today, and you've come to close and set us to go and look for ways of implementing and implement. But it started off with the regional forums that brought about 600 participants. That included local governmental officials or leaders from civil society, from the private sector, both the politicians and the technical, the traditional leaders, cultural leaders, and the children. The regional forums focused on the understanding what models are currently being implemented at the community level and how these can be used to scale up. These discussions were preceded with presentations by the SDG Secretariat, sharing the 2021 progress report, a panel discussion led by children, presentations by the selected MDAs on modules that government is implementing, focusing more on issues to do with welfare of people in their homes, in their communities, and wherever they are. The key messages from the regional forums included the following. Your Excellency, I'm now reporting. The local leaders expressed the desire to see more work done to localize the SDGs so that they can be integrated in their district development plans and even at the parish development level through the parish development programs. Local leaders called on central government to continuously engage with local governments through consultative forums and interactions where progress reports are shared, creating a sense of responsibility and ownership. Local leaders called on for capacity building, especially in integrating the SDGs into their local development plans. Local leaders also decried the financial resource challenges that they are faced with and that have hampered their ability to attain their development objectives, and recommended continuous engagements and sensitization and consultations, of course, as we all try to get through the challenges that have been forced on us by COVID-19 pandemic. The children who attended the regional forums from the Children's Parliament Initiative of World Vision shared messages through a variety of methods. These included panel discussions, drama skits, poems, and they discussed pertinent issues to do with SDGs that affect them most as children. In some of these areas, I want to bring out, these issues came out, the scourge of child marriages and teenage pregnancies, and its impact on them as children, their livelihood, but also their parents and communities, and also its effects on the attainment of our SDG targets. The children decried the effects of the closure of the schools that was brought onto them by us because of the COVID-19. They said they stayed home too long, and they lost time that they may not be able to catch up when it comes to issues to do with education. The children shared with us the effects of hunger on them in the communities and schools, and it's a critical concern to all of them. Many of them attend school without food being provided by the parents, and this has impacted on the outcomes. For schools that are feeding, the PTAs and some of the parents have imposed some charges on them, which is against the UPE policy, access to education policy, but without food again, it is impacting on their growth and development as children. Calling for a meeting point for the two, both the central government and local governments, but also the children and the parents, for us to go down and sensitize them more on who carries what responsibility and how government should help those carrying the responsibility to be sure, to ensure that they deliver on their responsibility and roles. The children noted that the gender imbalances still affect girls and boys at the community level. In some communities, the girls are still taken as commodities and exchanged in illegal marriages, and other forms of child abuse. The children shared with us, especially those from the mining communities, pollution of safe water sources and also other water sources for those communities which don't have water sources yet. They brought out those in the gold mining communities where water, where they've put mercury, is used to clean the gold, and all that is poured in the sources of water in the communities, and that has affected the health of the children and their parents in those communities. The children called on more investments in the education, better working conditions for their teachers. They said NRM has provided good environment and the parents have produced children. Government has provided free access to education, but the numbers have gone up. But like Honorable Cyrus has said, we are working and yet it demands of us to run. So you find that the classroom children ratio is high, that sometimes the teacher has to squeeze herself or himself to get to the chalkboard to be able to teach the children. Child-friendly health services for the children and adolescents. And I want to say this to my fellow girls. I felt bad as the minister in charge of SDGs when one girl stood up and said, in the debates and said, you have supplied condoms and they are flowing all over. The same government has not supplied what is to protect the girl child, the sanitary pads. It touched me as a girl from a village, and I think, Your Excellency, under your chair, we must find a solution. As girls, the 36 girls percent in the cabinet, we should find a solution to this, so that tomorrow we have more Jessica Lupos to take up when we are long gone to meet our Creator. In the group discussions by the participants at the regional forums, several critical issues relating to the impact of COVID-19 on the attainment of the several SDGs were raised, and these were related to those related to the SDGs were discussed in relation to the levels where they are as local governments and local leaders. The group discussions were limited basically to the SDGs under review for 2022, and these include SDG 4, that is to do with education, SDG 5 on gender, SDG 14 on life underwater, and SDG 15 on life on land. Participants noted that the SDG 4, some of the major changes that emerged, including the lockdown period, included introduction of home learning materials and different teaching and learning approaches that allowed only limited education continuity in some of the areas during the lockdown. Participants also pointed out that while in some areas e-learning materials were introduced, there was still a problem of lack of internet, low income to purchase data. The timing of the radios and TVs was also programs was also a challenge, because this would be the time the children would either be in the garden or the time to go and fetch water for home use. Some of the modules that can help accelerate education attainment that were mentioned include the use of parasocial teacher models at community level that are based on citizens groups that support education. On SDG 5 on gender equality, participants noted that while in some strong families, the lockdown strengthened family ties. In some communities, it caused high levels of gender-based violence, teenage pregnancies, high level of care work on the side of the children and the women and the girls, and loss of incomes, especially for the women in small businesses. On SDG 14, some of the key issues rotated around increased cultivation in swamps during the lockdown, mining and fishing, poisoning of water resources with the toxic materials, child labor, and related child abuse. On SDG 15, the agricultural land expansion that destroyed wetlands as a major issue, especially as people migrated from urban areas back to the villages so that they get back into agriculture, because this was the best employer for employment to the majority of the people. This increased the use of agricultural chemicals and the depletion of forest reserves, and this came out prominently, especially in Western Uganda. Several modules were presented by participants that could be used to accelerate SDGs. The parasocial model in education, the Korean model of development, also known as the New Inclusive Development Model, the Village Savings and Loans Association model, the Commercial Village model, the Bonga Youth model, Sustainable and Smart Agriculture model, in fishing and in fish farming, maggot farming using the palm oil waste, sugarcane waste to provide protein for poultry and animal feed, and other types of natural resource-based models were shared. On the government side, we presented our own model, the NUSAF for northern Uganda, but that begins from Bunyoro all the way through the north up to the eastern in Buked. The parish development model, that is really embracing, leaving nobody behind and reaching to the farthest. Development response to displacement impact project, that is Dr. Deep, to mention but a few. At the national level, we are graced with the attendance of the Right Honorable Prime Minister of Uganda, Right Honorable Robin Anabanja, who represented the President here yesterday. The Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, who was with us this morning, Right Honorable Anita Among Annette, and His Lordship, the Chief Justice, Alphonse Winnie Dolo, and several ministers. We have done this to bring the three arms together, because if you look at all of the SDGs, Your Excellency, we have the component of judiciary, that is number 15 and 16. Then we also have Parliament cuts across and the executive for all of the SDGs. So we had to come together because we are implementers. And what has been happening, Your Excellency, I want to report myself and my colleagues, that we have been going to Parliament, to the to Cabinet, and also to the UN to report on the performance of the judiciary and the performance of Parliament, yet we have not been critically involving them. So this conference helped us bring the three arms together so that we agree to begin working together, own the outcomes, and take on the new challenges, and to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. The Right Honorable Prime Minister noted that this was a good initiative for us to have discussions at this level and also at the regional level, and also advised us that we should go at the lower level as requested by the local governments, but also most importantly, hold this as an annual event. The session on priorities and financing of SDGs focused on the changes in global economies. It was noted that financing of SDGs will come from various sources: aid, alignment, private businesses, bonds, and other types of financing. And also we looked at how do we avoid or reduce on duplication within government, but also fight corruption and be able to save more money so that we implement and speed up the implementation of SDGs. The session noted that we need to have and move towards practical solutions. The financing session will also observe that there is need for expanding efficiency gains within government as a way of expanding the physical space and find resources for financing SDGs. The session noted that the mid-term review of the National Development Plan will help to refocus financing towards the National Development Plan and the SDGs. The session on financing also held that private sector in Uganda has a role to play. It will require the creating of an enabling environment for businesses. The session had about several initiatives that are working on to support the private sector, including programs of skilling young people, and we need to build more export processing zones and expanding the use of private equity in the investment of the SDGs. The parish development model presented and indicated that there is a strong connection between the parish development model and the SDGs, and the current rollout of the parish development model under your command, because it was discussed in cabinet and a decision was taken, will contribute and also accelerate the attainment of SDG 1, 2, 8, 10, 15, and 17. The parallel sessions on accelerating SDGs through agro-industrialization underscored the centrality of financing agriculture and key messages that solving problems of hunger in Uganda will have a clear multiplier effect on all of the SDGs. The session listened in a number of entrepreneurs of from the agro-industry who shared stories of change that they have enjoyed over the years. Of course, they have enjoyed because of the peace that we are all enjoying under the stewardship of His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and you, Your Excellency. They underscored the role of food security as a mechanism for stabilizing food supply chains. The parallel session on doing goodwill, doing well, how can the private sector do more within the COVID era, focused on a number of critical drivers to business and entrepreneurship. The session underscored the role of digital technologies in the development business for young people. The session listened to the perspective of a young coffee investor and highlighted important aspects like the need for policy incentives to encourage value addition, the role of e-commerce in the country, and the need to expand the information structure in the country. Your Excellency, allow me chip in 2 more sentences. When it came to this, she said, Ugandans go to NIRA and register, and the data is put there. But when you go to get from the Ministry of Works to get a driving permit, they still ask you for the same information, which information you gave government under NIRA. When you are going to register for investment under the Uganda Investment Authority, they will ask you for the same information. Yet the same information is with NIRA. When you go to get a passport, they ask you for the same information. This was a challenge to us. We need now to integrate this information and lessen on the burdens of disturbing the people we lead. The session also touched on several factors that data is prim and an important part of the private sector growth. The need for data synchronization across government agencies is something we should take as a key issue to simplify on time wasting, but also a way of fighting corruption. The second day commencement was today with a speech from the Right Honorable Speaker, who called on the organizers to take sessions outside Kampala in the villages and communities where SDG challenges are. This will help us to ensure a strong connection between the local and national level actors in the delivery of SDGs. She also called on the documentation of modules that work and can support the implementation of the SDGs. Your Excellency, I want to report that this first annual SDG conference commenced with 3 regional meetings, 1 in Mbale, 1 in Hoima, and 1 in Gulu. And it will be continued even at the lower level, like I said, the Prime Minister commanded us to. The Right Honorable Speaker called on mapping and identifying people and communities that are indeed left behind. This calls for availability of this integrated data. His Worship, the Chief Justice, made the important connection and cross-cutting role of SDG 16 and its impact on attainment of all the other SDGs. He noted that the attainment of SDGs will depend on a strong judicial infrastructure, the appointment of judges and magistrates, the expansion of judicial zones across the country, the elimination of corruption across the country will go a long way in supporting the attainment of SDGs and thereby meeting the National Development Plan and the SDG targets for Uganda. The session on leaving no one behind, technology, data, and evidence for social protection focused on the role of data. The session underscored the role of data in the implementation of the SDGs with WUBOS, expanding its numbers of indicators that have data points in Uganda from 92 to 119 indicators. The development of statistical plans by development entities is being encouraged at the national level as well as among stakeholders like culture institutions. In the session on protecting the gains and strengthening investments towards achieving SDGs for children and young, the need to enable the young to exploit their potential, protect the young while in school and the environment at large, and invest in the feeding of the children was also addressed. It was noted that gains have been made, but gaps still exist. For example, reporting violence has improved, but we still have issues to handle, especially in the communities on issues to do with defilement. Challenges of inadequate data and questionable data accuracy constraint on resources due to influx of learners in school post-COVID still hinder acceleration of the implementation, keeping girls in school, but also, it was brought to our attention that when it comes to the dropout rate in schools, Karamoja, those who begin primary, the primary completion is at 6%. This means that we have to increase on issues to do with the sensitization and mobilizing the communities to take children to school, but also sustainably have them in school. Sexuality education for the young, especially those in transition from childhood to adulthood. Have youth representatives included in conversations whenever policymakers sit and incorporate mental health in our policies. Civil society organization on SDG implementation, monitoring and reporting discussions highlighted the need to put data into the hands of the people so that we have dividends and the means to hold the leaders accountable. With that, corruption and misuse of public resources will be checked. Collaboration was stressed as a very important issue, with both for public resources to be checked, but also work together with the civil society, private sector, as government, as we give the guidelines and regulations for the different activities. There is only 8 years left to 2030. So there is the need to speed up. Like Honorable Cyrus said, we are working, but yet time is running. So the two must meet. We must increase our speed. At the same time, make sure the speed also is not a problem for us not to achieve sustainably. The outcome of this will be shared with us, but what I want to say, Your Excellency, what has been discussed you have heard, we shall have that written. Thank you for your indulgence. I want to take this opportunity. On behalf of the people gathered here, on behalf of those who are online, on behalf of all the people who are waiting to benefit from the SDGs, on behalf of those who have benefited, but they need to scale up, increase, and speed up sustainably, I want to take this opportunity to invite you, Your Excellency, to come and address us. Can we clap? Can you all stand up, please, to welcome?
Please take your seat. Thank you. The Right Honorable, Kasule Lumumba, the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister in charge of general duties. Your Excellency Adonia Ayebale, Uganda's permanent representative to the UN, and indeed other ambassadors, if they are present,
and heads of mission and the UN resident coordinator, heads of UN agencies in Uganda. For example, the UN Women, and I'm happy that the men are always not asking for the UN men. Everyone has accepted that it is a UN Women. I want to thank my brother from Kumi municipality for accepting that it is a UN Women. The religious leaders present, the honorable members of parliament, the head of service and secretary to cabinet, all invited guests. I would like to adopt the protocol as articulated by the minister. I am very privileged to have found the last session, and I actually benefited a lot from the session. But most importantly, I would like to thank Honorable Kasule Lumumba for summarizing to me and all of us the contents of the conference which you have had in the last 2 days. I was also just asking a question which I am sure many of you are asking. Are all the 43 million Ugandans, whether they are in Kotido, whether they are in Chenjojo, or they are in Koboko, or they are in Alebtong, or they are in Sese, Kalangala, are they all aware that what they are doing now, what they are thinking about, how they are doing it, and in whichever levels, whether from homes, whether from offices, whether from their development agencies, whether in their gardens or in their cultural activities, are they all aware that they are part and parcel of the validation process that will finally get the status of Uganda as a country in terms of the implementation of SDGs? That's my question. And many of you asked it even when you were discussing. Awareness, very important. But I would like to congratulate the minister for accelerating the process of ensuring that we go to the grassroots, but also we also coordinate at the national level on 3 arms of government to ensure that everybody is aware about SDGs and what they are expected of in terms of implementing what they are doing in order to achieve our desired goals and outcomes. I have a short prepared text here because I know you have been here for 2 days, and I am very well aware that having consumed a lot of wisdom and knowledge from the presenters, you are now itching to return home. So I will not take a very long time. I would just like to put you on notice and draw your attention now to my short message. Let me take this opportunity to thank you all for your valued contribution and participation in this very important event, the first annual Sustainable Development Goals Conference 2022. I am informed that this is the first annual SDG conference, which is a multi-stakeholder platform organized jointly by the government of Uganda under the Office of the Prime Minister in collaboration with the United Nations Uganda and United Nations in Uganda and other development partners, civil society, academia, the private sector, and the local governments. This is a big milestone, Honorable Lumumba. I would like to commend the Office of the Right Honorable Prime Minister whose office is responsible for the 2030 Agenda Coordination in Uganda, for hosting this conference. I have also learned that this conference was preceded by regional consultative sustainable development goals forums that were held in Mbale, Hoima, and Gulu, which attracted over 600 physical participants and over 1,000 virtual participants drawn from local government leaders, civil society organizations, religious leaders, private sector, and development partners. The approach that you took of using a bottom-up approach that culminated into this first SDG conference is a very good approach. This is because it assures us that the discussions you held here are rooted in perspectives of citizens, both at the local and the national level. This approach is consistent with the NRM's efforts under the wise and able leadership of His Excellency the President of the Republic of Uganda, General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Our NRM manifesto commits us to deliver meaningful growth and development in Uganda through infrastructural development, science and technology, and national unity. And I would like to thank the Minister, because all the pillars of NRM talk about SDGs, and in a very strong way. They bring it out very, very clearly. This is done through working closely with the Wananchi. Through the National Development Plan 3 and its alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals, Uganda continues to make impressive strides that are starting to bear fruits, as evidenced by our recent ascension to middle income status as a country. And I think we should clap for this. Your Excellency Ayebale, did you know that we are now a middle income status country? But His Excellency the President, he reminds us that we should work harder to retain it or even to move higher, so that we are not dropped at another validation exercise. So the ball is in our courts. The NRM has done their best as a party to lead and make Uganda reach the status where we have reached. So it is our responsibility to move it further from that state. Ladies and gentlemen, we are acutely aware of the need to double up all our efforts to ensure that we protect all the gains that have been made and also explore new innovations to respond to the challenges that have emerged from the global COVID-19 pandemic and associated global instability. The 2022 Annual SDG Progress Report, which has been produced by the Office of the Prime Minister, coordinated by the SDG Secretariat, and discussed during the past 2 days, is an important government report card. The findings in the report show that significant progress have been made in the attainment of the several SDGs. And I would like to request the Honorable Kasule Lumumba, my sister, to transform what she has just been presenting to us here into a cabinet memo. And then the head of service is here, who is also secretary to cabinet. I am sure she will prioritize it and put it on the agenda of our cabinet as soon as possible. On specific SDGs, I am informed that Uganda is moderately improving on SDGs Goal 2, on zero hunger, Goal 3, on good health and well-being, Goal 7, on affordable and clean energy, Goal 8, on decent work and economic growth, and Goal 9, on industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and is on track to achieve SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production, and 13 on climate change. This is good progress, but we must double our efforts and ensure that we reach the national and global SDG targets. I have further learned that in these 2 days of deliberations, you have had rich and informative discussions on several areas under the conference theme, I quote, building effective models to accelerate the SDGs in the COVID-19 era. I close the quote. You discussed issues related to priorities of financing the SDGs, the Paris Development Model, agro-industrialization, private sector, local governments, the role of parliament and judiciary, technology, data and innovations, as well as youth, civil society, in line with their participation in SDGs. I note from the outcome document that several important commitments have been reached that will help to accelerate the attainment of SDGs in Uganda, and I commend these efforts very highly. Let me also thank those who have played a role in getting us to this major milestone, including the SDG Secretariat within the Office of the Prime Minister and the United Nations country team led by Her Excellency Susan Ngongi Namondo, the UN Resident Coordinator in Uganda, who we are always reminding that she should remove the first NA so that her name reads Mondo, and then she becomes a Ugandan. At an appropriate time, I'm sure she will be getting back to us on that. I also commend the civil society organizations under the umbrella of the Uganda National NGO Forum for their willingness to contribute financially and actively participate, and other international NGOs like World Vision, who supported the participation of children in the whole process, right from the regional forums to this conference. Government is committed to the pledge to leave no one behind. No child behind, no girl behind, no woman behind, no man behind. As it steers to achieve the 17 SDGs in Uganda. At the same time, the government is also starkly aware that while it must take the lead, this is a journey hinged on partnerships. And I am very glad that the partnerships have already been explored comprehensively. Let's stick to what we have agreed here in the meeting. As a country that led the world towards the 2015 in endorsing the SDGs, when Uganda chaired the 69th session of the United Nations Assembly, we consider our participation in the SDG implementation an important obligation to the citizens of Uganda and indeed to the people of the world. It is therefore good to know that this annual SDG conference is speaking to the 2022 high-level political forum on SDGs that will be held this July in New York. The high-level political forum, which is themed, I quote, building back better from the coronavirus disease or COVID-19, while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a close quote, is very much in line with the deliberations you have held over the last 2 days. The models you have examined for accelerating the implementation of SDGs will not only be useful to Uganda, but also to the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, as I come to the conclusion on my remarks, we must remember that conferences like this that promote multi-stakeholder dialogue are a sign of maturity in our democratization process ushered in by the NRM government. In such conferences, we openly and transparently share our successes and failures, and through positive criticism, work together to to look for solutions that can contribute to triggering actions towards the nation's transition from a peasant society to a full and sustainable middle-income status. So this is the best approach. And as you go out there, you come from so many backgrounds, you should encourage our people to always pursue dialogue and avoid mechanisms which disrupt the livelihoods of the people. But that one we can talk when we are dealing with another forum of politics, because we would specifically would like to discourage politicians from the demonstrations, walk to work, disrupting the activities and businesses of people. In light of this, therefore, I would like in a special way to recognize the immense contribution of the Right Honorable Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Robin Anabanja and her team for the continued effort in producing the SDG progress reports and SDG voluntary national review reports, and consequently organizing them for us to review. I therefore wish to implore all of us, the delegates, that the agreed actions that have been reached at during the 2 days deliberations should be followed up to the logical conclusion and implemented to attain our overall development results. With these few remarks, let me thank you once again for inviting me to also interact with you. And it is now my pleasure to officially close this first annual SDG conference and wish you a safe journey home. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, for your remarks. And a great key promise right there is translating everything that we've discussed and the document that the Minister General Duties did present into a cabinet memo. Another round of applause for that. That is a commitment from the government itself. And without any further ado, this has been closed. I will request the technical team that we take the anthems in reverse order, starting with the East African anthem and then the Ugandan anthem. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. The Vice President, Her Excellency Jessica Lupa, will be taking her leave. And we will just kindly request if it is possible to have a photo moment right outside there as she gets in. Minister for General Duties, Honorable Justine Kasule Lumumba, will be joining in. The UN Resident Coordinator, Ms. Susan Ngongi Namondo, will be joining in. Ambassador Adonia Yebari, Your Excellency, please join in. Adikemi Ndieli and Sheila Ngatia family from the United Nations will as well be joining in that brief photo moment, and we will be closing this. A very special thank you to Uganda Broadcasting Corporation for relaying this live and ensuring the world outside can be able to get everything that we were having. A special one to Fenon Events for making this flawless, and Rocky Group for ensuring that you're giving us all the entertainment that we do desire. Ladies and gentlemen, you are free to interact. You are free to make sure that you indulge.
When we're together, the vibe is pretty alright. Our taste is pretty awesome. We are Uganda's